And now to unpack this for us, we are now joined by Claire Taylor, who is a researcher for Gun Free South Africa, and she joins us via our video link. Claire, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Of course, we've just seen that package compiled by my colleague, just showing how ineffective the CFR has become. Why do we find ourselves in this position, even though we have taken such strides to make sure that we do indeed register firearms in this country?
I think there are a range of reasons that we find ourselves in this situation 20 years on. And part of it has to do with the fact that the police see the Central Firearms Registry as being an administrative burden. They don't recognize the important role that the registry, an accurate registry, can play in fighting crime in South Africa. And to say that gun violence has been steadily increasing since 2010, and at the moment we're looking at 31 people shot and killed every day in this country, the majority of whom are killed with illegal guns. And we do know, though, that the majority of illegal guns in this country were once legally held before they would leak into criminal hands. And so tightening controls over licensed weapons is a really important crime-fighting measure, and the police need to recognize that in order to manage the registry effectively.
And one would say that if the police are complaining about an admin problem, was there enough thought process put into the CFR? Because one would say that really an admin process is really quite minuscule if we are seeing 31 lives being lost at the hands of firearms.
So, Mbali, you're raising a really important point, which is about the costs associated with the effective registry. And so the research project looked at the feasibility of outsourcing South Africa's Central Firearms Registry by looking at other countries' examples. One of the countries we looked at was Canada, and they established a registry under an independent authority, which lasted for 20 years. It was subsequently downscaled and moved back to the police because of the costs associated. But one of the reasons we have such high levels of gun violence in South Africa is because the money that was invested in developing the Central Firearms Registry, it was amounted to 343 million rand, was in fact written off as wasteful and fruitless expenditure. And that was a contract that was entered into with a company called Waymark Infotech, which didn't result in an effective registry and database. There's been a new contract awarded to a company called Providence Software Solutions. It's described as being comprehensive and expensive, but we have no other information on this contract. And so a key component to the expense associated with developing a registry are issues around transparency and accountability. And so we've called, for example, for a task team to be established to oversee the work of the Central Firearms Registry, as well as the work of Providence Software Solutions, to ensure that the mistakes of the past aren't repeated.
And Claire, when you look at really the numbers here, 31 lives are being lost in South Africa because of gun violence and us actually not taking the appropriate steps, which is already available for us in our legislation. One would say that it is really concerning, and this is something that we should be taking seriously in this country.
Absolutely. And so the research that we undertook was looking at the feasibility of outsourcing the Central Firearms Registry, for example, by privatizing it, by devolving responsibilities that are currently undertaken by the Central Firearms Registry. For example, the registry could be managed by another government department like the Department of Home Affairs, which already manages a range of registries, or that an independent authority is established. And it seems that an independent authority might be the best option because it means that it would still be accountable to the police, but the police actually wouldn't manage a number of the functions that the Central Firearms Registry is. And that would promote efficiency and accountability and transparency, we feel. But as I say, this was exploratory research and more work needs to be done. And certainly Gun Free South Africa will be engaging with the police on this research and what immediate steps can be taken to make the Central Firearms Registry more accountable and more transparent in the way that it works.
And you also talk about a task team that needs to be established. And of course, these are some of the proposals in which you make, to make this more effective. When you look at the research that was conducted, one would ask that what needs to be included to actually make it more effective. I know that you've gone through great lengths to explain to us in terms of the research that has been conducted, but for the country to see more firearms being registered, this task team, what needs to be the main focus here?
So I think that there are a few issues that you're raising, Bali. And I want to step back slightly as well to just say that South Africa is a signatory to a number of international and regional firearms control protocols. And these require that our government put in place measures to both mark and trace firearms. And so South Africa doesn't need to implement these requirements by ourselves. We can ask the international community for assistance. And so two of the countries that we included in the research, Jamaica and the Dominican Republic, are currently being supported by the United Nations. South Africa is both a member of the UN and the Commonwealth, and there is funding and technical support available to assist. So I think the development of a task team would be something new for South Africa to be involving both state and non-state actors. And it would necessarily have to involve IT specialists and firearms control experts, as well as people who are actually using the system. So that would be gun manufacturers, dealers, gunsmiths, and gun owners themselves. Because part of the purpose of the registry is that you make it easy for these different interest groups to comply with the law. And at the moment, the Central Firearms Registry isn't functional, so people aren't able to comply easily with the law, and that also contributes to breaking of the law and illegal firearms. So I think the point to be made is that there is technical assistance that we could ask for globally, and that in fact we are obliged to be putting these systems in place to control illegal guns.
And of course, if maybe you could also just elaborate for us the dangers associated with not registering these firearms, especially in a country like ours where we are faced with porous borders, and these are guns that can actually leave, the South African country.
So what we need to recognize is that almost all, if not all, illegal guns in South Africa were once legal. And the biggest source of illegal guns in this country is the licensed stocks. And that's both guns owned by civilians, but also guns owned by the state. And these move from legal stocks to illegal stocks, for example, through loss or theft. And illegal guns are are highly prized because they're outside of any control. But one of the problems is that they can be used repeatedly to commit crimes. So, for example, you referenced the Prince Lou guns case. One gun that was stolen by Prince Lou and sold to a criminal has been found to have killed 15 different individuals. So the gun can keep circulating in a community, which just highlights how important it is to have accurate records that track a gun from the cradle, from the point of manufacture, right through the life cycle of that gun to destruction. And that allows the state to know who owns what gun for which purpose, how many guns there are, how many gun owners there are, but also when there's loss and theft, to give an indication of how big the illegal pool of guns is and what measures need to be taken to recover and destroy those guns. So,
all right.
To just re-emphasize that the Central Firearms Registry is not an administrative burden. It is a critical crime-fighting measure. And South Africa needs to address the problems with the Central Firearms Registry in order to address the high levels of gun violence in this country.